we associate the reform of the liturgy with the desire of the Council, expressed especially in its document Sacrosanctum Concilium. But the document in itself is not sufficient in indicating the reform or the limits of the reform, I would say either one, because in fact the Church lives after a council and continues to do its work, and the reform that was indicated in broad strokes by the council continued under the pontificate of Paul VI. The Missal of Paul VI does not presume any less reverence at all than the Tridentine Missal. We Americans, in any case, rather have come naturally to think that in the liturgy we want to express ourselves, and if it doesn't feel like us, then we don't want to say it. But the whole tradition of liturgy is not primarily expressive of where people are and what they want to say to God. Instead, it is impressive. It forms us, and it is always bigger than any given community that celebrates. I think the Mass can be celebrated very beautifully and worthily in either direction. The question is what the priest understands his role to be and how he expresses in his style of celebration. If he's facing the assembly and the assembly is gathered around the altar, you're making a kind of visual symbol, rightly, a symbol of the whole community united. The symbol is slightly tweaked. If the priest turns toward the east, you hear it said, turning his back to the people. Well, that's a misinterpretation of what the priest is doing. And it's sort of like that guy has turned his back on us. No, it's Christ, the priest, turns toward the Father with his people behind him. That's what it means. People can feel offended by what they call the priest turning his back and you can't see what's happening. But in fact, there is nothing to see. The mystery is invisible, no matter which way you turn. So that's why we shouldn't fight about it. I can't see. No, you can't. Sacrifices are meals. That's a way in which one participates in a sacrifice. Very close to that question that you'll hear the same sort of worry or complaint is that the Tridentine Mass is focused on God and the Mass of Paul VI is focused on the assembly. Textually, that is not true. But in our talk, perhaps we've made that mistake. But they're inextricable. Christ is crucified, risen, sends the Spirit for the sake of building the church. You can't have Mass without, in the end, noticing the church. That is to say, noticing the community. That's the whole purpose of it. But that's different from the community expressing itself. That's a mistake. The community is impressed, indeed comes into being precisely because of God's action. So, and precisely by focusing on God, the community comes into being. So again, those are false opposites. Those are not to be opposed. Participation doesn't necessarily mean doing something. Participation, the deepest participation on the part of the assembly is following it. The Missal of Paul VI is presuming that the people understand themselves and are instructed in this way, understand themselves to be involved in a ritual action from start to finish, and that their very presence in the church is participation. To hear the word, to sing the song, to stand now, to kneel now, to receive the sacrament, that's participation. basically the reason to be critical would be to say, is this working? Was this a good move or not? And of course it can be changed further. As we look at things that were eliminated and perhaps regret their loss, of course those can be put back in a new form of the Missal. So I think it's a living product that takes place under the guidance of Peter.